Hello, and welcome back to the Downhome podcast. I'm Elizabeth Whitten, and joining me today is longtime Downhome contributor and frequent podcast guest, Dennis Flynn. He's here to take us on a journey through Newfoundland and Labrador's pirates and their rumored buried treasure waiting to be discovered. Welcome back to the Downhome podcast, Dennis.
Thank you very much for having me.
There are plenty of film franchises, cartoons, TV shows, and books that feature pirates. So what do you think is so captivating about pirates and their treasure to people?
Well, I think it harkens back to a simpler time for a lot of folks now. I know it's overly romanticized in the movies and the books and films and whatnot, but for people of a certain age, if you grew up as a young boy or a young girl reading Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson or Kidnapped, or even Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, there's this wonderful quote from Twain that said, "Now and then we had the hope that if we lived and we were good, God would permit us to be pirates." And it's one of those things that I think that kids, when you were less iPads, less movies, less computers, less video games, you were forced to use your imagination quite a bit. And growing up in Newfoundland with all our rich history of piracy, we certainly would have been exposed to these type of stories and folklore, and it would be just something to play and pretend at as kids.
Right, and it's interesting how these outlaw figures like Billy Murren and Peter Easton are now part of town lore, when back in the day they probably would have been reviled and feared by locals.
This is very true. It's certainly time does tend to forgive and gloss over. These folks would have been dangerous characters to be given a wide berth in their day. But like you said, we do have a tendency when you have that distance of several hundred years, it can become more folklore and a little bit more palatable and just part of our history, and there it is,
Yeah, and I never really thought about it until I read your article, but Newfoundland and Labrador's history of shipwrecks lends itself nicely to the lure of lost treasure, because you kind of bring us on a map almost of where different rumored treasure are buried locally.
Yeah, that's actually it was a fantastic little project. Sometimes every time you go around hiking or kayaking or doing a bit of biking or whatever, just driving into a small community and taking a few photographs, invariably somebody will come up and they'll see you and we'll get chatting and they'll tell you some stories, or they'll mention a particular headland or something, and you'll say, "Well, what's that about?" And even maybe you take some of these things with a grain of truth or a grain of sand, I should say, salt, but there may be some truth in them in any event. And there's almost always a great story of a shipwreck or a rescue or a piracy and a treasure that's lost that somebody's looking for. Right?
Yeah, and you kind of brought it up in your article, but is there a community of people who kind of like on the side kind of go hunting for pirate treasure here?
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are folks who are, metal detectorists and explorers and so on and so forth. There's all kinds of particular regulations around that, and I don't actually go seriously looking for any pirate treasure or any other treasure myself. But I look for the stories. The stories themselves are the real treasure for me. Like I said, if anybody was doing that, I'd kind of would just advise them to be aware of particular regulations and private property and so on and so forth, and personal safety and all those wonderful things. There are folks out there, I'm sure, who do a bit of exploring, but I think for most of them, deeply in having an interesting story when you reach a location.
Right, I was going to ask if you were tempted to go treasure hunting, but it sounds like, the stories are more interesting and you just stumble across them.
Well, it's true, and I'd be the type of guy, if I did find something that was of significance, I think I'd do the honorable thing and turn it over to the proper museum authorities so Newfoundland and Labrador could enjoy it, and not just one person.
Yeah.
But that's me, so.
They would be archaeology sites.
will note I've never found anything. So,
Well,
no.
I was also wondering, you kind of walk us through various, famous pirates who kind of made this their hunting grounds, but did you have a favorite pirate tale?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, obviously, there's some great stories associated with the Peter Easton out in Harbour Grace, who they have a fabulous community museum down there in Harbour Grace, and you can go down and check that out and learn quite a bit about his legend. He was a real character, actually, and they say that when he was leaving Newfoundland for good, about 1618. He was going across, about to go across the Atlantic, and midway across, somewhere along the way, he encountered the Spanish plate fleet, the gold plate fleet, somewhere around the Azores, and captured a bunch of treasure ships, and became so ludicrously wealthy that he retired in France as the Marquis of Savoy. And he gained not just one pardon for his piracy from the King of England, he gained two. So I guess he paid a little bit for that. But prior to leaving, they say he had to run a blockade in Newfoundland, and they allege that he had hid a smaller treasure somewhere in Newfoundland. And some people say it's around Harbour Grace. Other people say it was around the Green Point area of Portagrave. I've heard that it might be down on Oderin, which is an island out in Placentia Bay, and down around maybe Renew somewhere. So, I mean, there were areas that he was known to frequent. So it's possible that there is something out there. I mean, it's not beyond reasonable belief that he could have indeed hid something. And people say, well, why didn't you come back for it? Well, if you got as much treasure as he did, there was no need to come back for whatever he left behind. That's one. And another lovely one is the tale of Billy Mirren up around the Cape Friels area and the Dead Shore coming down. I was coming back from Fogo Island and went into a little gas bar, and a gentleman had a huge romanticized statue of a pirate outside his gas bar, and it sort of looked a little bit like Johnny Depp on steroids from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and got chatting to him about it, and apparently he bought this wonderful statue on Kijiji and put it there as representative of the legend of Billy Mirren. And so Billy Mirren apparently was a local guy who came there around the mid-1880s. Not sure where he came from or what he was about, but they kind of suspected he was a salver or somebody who used to salvage ships, and he may have been a pirate. And he was rumored to have money, or at least know the location of buried treasure. And so one of the folks who were looking after him, he was a bit of a drinker and that, so on and so forth. And they were getting up in years. And at one point, he asked the girl, he said, "Can you keep a secret?" And the young lady said, "Oh yes, Billy, yes, Mr. Murray, I can keep a secret." And he replied, "Aye, so can I." So whatever his pirate treasure was, it's probably still out there. It's not been found, and he wasn't telling. Yeah. So those are a couple. And of course, growing up here in Colliers, there was always legends of pirate treasure in the resettled area of the community called James Cove. There's a wonderful little recitation. Somebody was renovating a house, and they found a recitation maybe written about 60 or 70 years ago about two older gentlemen who went down at night digging for Captain Kidd's treasure down in James Cove. And, they had all kinds of shenanigans and ensued, and they never found any treasure, but they got scared. They thought they encountered some ghosts, and away they went. Mm-hmm. But there's really, of course, there's no real evidence that Captain Kidd, Scottish privateer, was ever in Newfoundland. But when you go, again, he's another character who shows up in a lot of places. I was in Labrador on the Red Bay area, hiking up this gorgeous trail to a lookout, and there's a pond up top there. And they say that in that pond there is a ghostly pirate, a huge ghostly pirate who is guarding a treasure that's supposedly sunk down in the pond, alleged to be Captain Kidd's treasure. So, I think people kind of find these characters and latch onto them and use them as a way to explore mysterious circumstances, and everybody likes to hope for something. And maybe it's pirate treasure, or maybe it's winning the Lotto 649. We all want to have something to have a little bit of hope and a little bit of fun in our day. And it doesn't really, in a enormously practical way. It's just something fun that makes the trip along the way much more enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking to me today.
Oh, totally my pleasure.
The March issue of Downhome magazine is out on stands now, so you can pick it up and read Dennis Flynn's article, Pirate Treasure Tour. You can also head on over to the Downhome website, downhomelife.com. We're also on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for listening.